Language is interesting. We actually talk to ourselves all day, every day, and in fact, every waking moment of your conscious life. So I guess that's 4 years old. As soon as language starts to really develop, we begin to develop an inner dialogue. And that inner dialogue then stays with us our entire lives. Most of us don't think much about how we think. We just don't. We are very focused on what we're doing, and we've been taught that the mind and body are separate, so it doesn't really matter what we're thinking. Now, obviously, we're smart enough that when we look very closely at this idea of the mind and body being separate, we can see that that is ridiculous, right? We all know that in a way, the mind is the governor of the body. I mean, nobody argues that the brain isn't what controls most, if not all, of our functioning. So when we start to think about thoughts being separate from the body more closely, we're all smart enough to sort of see that that's bullshit, right? Frankly. So, but we haven't quite mastered understanding the relationship between thoughts and how they might be affecting our lives day in and day out. So, very basic. I just want to go over the basics of this here and now. If you think about what a thought actually is, it's a physical thing, right? Every thought you have is an electrical little impulse that's happening at the neurotransmitter level in the brain. And it's interesting because in the world of mental health, we see people get prescribed mental health medications, psychiatric medications all the time. And when you ask the average person in the field or someone who maybe is taking those types of medications, oftentimes you'll hear things like, these medications balance out the brain, that I have some type of deficiency in some neurotransmitter that these medications are balancing. So oftentimes we get this very trite oversimplification of what causes depression or what causes anxiety. People will say, I have a deficiency in neurotransmitters. And the truth is, that's not exactly true. That's like saying that I have cancer because I have irregular cellular activity happening in the body, right? We're naming what's happening, but we're not actually explaining what the cause is. And that is the same at the level of psychiatric medication and the need for it in the brain. What am I saying? Well, every thought is like pushing a button in your neurotransmitters. And unfortunately, because of a lot of different factors that we'll get into over time, we have a negativity bias. So our culture leans more to looking and focusing on the negative, whether it's in our relationships, our love relationships. In one social psychology experiment, it was a 5-to-1 ratio. It took 5 positive experiences with their partner to offset 1 negative experience. So I love that study because it just sort of highlights how much we focus more on the negative than the positive. So that our negativity bias has developed over time to keep us safe. It's basically the phenomenon of being able to put your hand on a hot stove once and never having to learn that again. So we are just prone to remember where the danger is. And that's why, the news is very salaciously negative. That's why, we are just so much more honed in on why people will slow down to see a car crash and why traffic will, suddenly come to a halt when there is a crash, because we look for the negative. The problem with that, however, as a culture, we don't realize how much we're motivated by our basic survival instincts and by our basic survival needs. The negativity bias has grown out of a basic survival need. In other words, our brain is prone to see the negative, so it keeps us alive. There's another reason, though, interestingly enough, why we are more negatively focused in our culture today. And that is our survival need for companionship and connection to others. So if you think about it, it is also a primal human survival need to interact with other people, because we need other people to survive. Now, if you take us back 250,000 years to when we were hunter and gatherers, we needed other people to survive. We needed each of us to contribute, to play our part in our tribes, to continue to keep our species alive. But we also know that basic human development has evolved to interact with each other. So it's no secret that we need each other to live happy and healthy lives. However, think about like what the stereotype here in New York is of New Yorkers. So we tend to be thought of as like the grumpy, kind of rude, get out of my effing way kind of, right? We're sort of like the jaded of amongst us. And that's true. Pretty true. I would say that that's a pretty accurate representation of New Yorkers. We're all kind of goal-oriented and trying to get something done. And yes, get out of my way, that kind of thing. But if you look more closely at it, what has happened here is we've all sort of adapted becoming more negative in order to connect with one another. So not so long ago, I was at a family event. It was a women-only, a female-only event. Now, I had just celebrated some big news in my own life, and I hadn't been around my family in a while. But what I noticed right away, when I was greeting some of my cousins and aunts that I hadn't seen in a long time, as I went to greet them and we started talking about what was going on with me, and I started to get excited about, I'm launching this new company, I could start to see that as I kind of got happier and happier, a couple of my loved ones started to back away. And I mean physically were pulling away from me. Now, what I observed in me, was immediately I could sense that their face kind of looked more sad. Somehow me feeling good and being happy became about what they don't have or what's not going well for them. And I could see them starting to get disinterested and uncomfortable in the conversation and start to pull away. So quickly, I naturally abandoned my talking. Whatever I was saying, I just sort of said, you know what, forget it, enough about me, what's going on with you? And then as they, of course, started talking, and this actually happened in two different conversations, it was pretty negative very quickly. Oh, I've been struggling with this, and I have this physical problem now. And so I could see me have to kind of, get sad and negative and, do the real concerned face thing. And not that I wasn't genuinely concerned, but what it highlighted for me was we're not encouraged to be happy. We're not socially encouraged to be happy. In fact, all of our attention immediately goes to the person in crisis. We have this negativity bias, and it really works against us. We have it so much so that on average, it's estimated that each of us has, and this is not the average depressed person, this is the average person, about an 80-20 split of negative thoughts to positive thoughts. Here's the problem with that. The brain works using automation primarily. And because the brain operates on automation, everything we do, we are more likely to do if we've done it a lot before. That means that we've trained a habit into our mind and body to be negative. So most of us don't even realize that we're waking up every day, activating negative thoughts, feeling negative emotion, which is activating more negative thoughts, which is activating more negative emotion, and it's just building momentum. Over time, if you continue with this thoughts and feelings pattern, you end up with a diagnoses like depression or anxiety. And lo and behold, that is a pretty common phenomenon, a lot more common than people are being diagnosed. This negativity bias, that 80-20 negative thoughts to positive thoughts split, is incredibly dangerous for us because of how the mind and body are designed. We paint the world in how we feel. So your perception, how you experience through your senses the world around you, is determined by how you feel at any given moment. So think back to a time when you were having a really shitty day, right? The worst day you can remember. If you think back to that day, and now imagine that during that day at some point, you get a phone call from your best friend. And your best friend is really excited to share their amazing news, whether it's they won the lottery or they're getting married, right? Some great thing has happened to them. As much as you love them and care about them, in that moment, because you're feeling so down, you can't feel happy for them. Instead, you might go, oh, great, like take everything in you in that moment to try to muster some, positive statement to make them feel good, right? But inside your head, you're thinking like, this effing bitch, I can't believe that she doesn't deserve it, I deserve it, or, why do these things always happen to her, not to me, or why does this person always get, I always get the shit end of the stick. Somebody else's positive experience in that moment when we're feeling really down is going to be more about our not getting something or not feeling good than it is about them. However, if that same thing happened on a day where we were feeling amazing, we would probably be feeling tears of joy for our friend because we genuinely care about them and want good things for them. So this is critical because every single day, your thoughts are being, the direction of your thoughts is being determined by your feelings. And that's important because what you perceive is going on around you, and the stories you tell about what's going on around you is based on how you feel at any given moment. And I know it feels a lot like that can't be true, like there is some objective truth that we all see or share in common. The reality is that there really isn't. In other words, there really is no right and wrong per se. It's really only what's right and wrong through my eyes at any given moment. And that's the key. The key is understanding that if I put all of my focus on managing my mood and making sure that I feel good as often as possible, my thoughts are going to naturally be very positive, be very optimistic. And when I engage in the world, I'm a lot more likely to have good things happen, to see things in a positive light, to make the best out of it, and to really go on to have a very happy and healthy life.